All right, well, we are going to go ahead and get started, and I will keep monitoring that waiting room and letting people come on as they appear. So I just want to welcome everybody, and I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. This is actually the very first year that Prineville Jewish Center has hosted an International Holocaust Remembrance Day program. We usually do ours on Yom HaShoah, but having had access to such a wonderful speaker, I felt it was definitely appropriate, especially in the world that we are living in today, to be able to take advantage of having this day as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ambar Robbins, and I am the Education and Program Director here at the Prineville Jewish Center, which is still celebrating its 110th anniversary this year. Was settled a long time ago, but also had a lot of Holocaust survivors as part of our membership over the years. So this is something that is very, very near and dear to us. I'm also the granddaughter of an Auschwitz Bergen-Belsen survivor. So this is my thank you and my appreciation for my family and what they went through, to be able to continue to educate not just our children, but the entire community around us, both Jews and non-Jews alike, about the atrocities that have befallen the Jews, and to make sure that when we say never again, never forget, that that's exactly what it is that we're doing. So I just want to take a moment to share with you something that our music teacher had put together. So give me 1 second to just share my screen here. Oops. Hold on 1 second. Great screen.
The very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow, perhaps, if the sun's tears would sing against a white stone. Such a yellow is carried lightly way up high. It went away, I'm sure, because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. The very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow, perhaps, if the sun's tears would sing against a white stone. For 7 weeks I've lived here, penned up inside this ghetto. But I have found what I love here. The dandelions call to me, and the white chestnut branches in the court. Only I never saw another butterfly. The very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow, perhaps, if the sun's tears would sing against a white stone. That butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live in here. In the ghetto.
Wow, that was really beautiful.
Yes, that was our incredibly talented music teacher, Sherry Chalmette, who went ahead and recorded a musical version of the very famous poem. I'm also very grateful tonight to have with us Rabbi Dr. Bernhard Rosenberg. As some of you have been on a little bit earlier heard, this is not our first time working together on Holocaust programming, though is very, very greatly appreciated. For those who are not familiar with him, he is the Rabbi Emeritus at Congregation Beth El in Edison, New Jersey, who has taught Holocaust and Genocide Studies graduate courses at Rutgers University and Communications and Public Speaking at Yeshiva University and Rutgers. He has received the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Humanitarian Award, the Chaplain of the Year Award from the New York Board of Rabbis for his efforts during and following 9/11, and was presented with the annual Rabbi Israel Aushwitz Award by the New York Board of Rabbis. He appears frequently on radio and TV and has published hundreds of articles relating to the Holocaust. It is my honor to welcome our opening speaker tonight, Rabbi Rosenberg.
I'm deeply honored to be here. You know, Imba, I gotta tell you, you're so beautiful. You could do any TV show on any network. So thank you. Dr. Fried, how are you?
Jack, please, Jack, thank God. Baruch Hashem, everything is good. Yourself?
So you're in my book.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
thank you.
I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to get into your area. I agree with everything you're going to say. So, unless anyone asks me a question, I'm on your side. I'm going to begin with something related to the Holocaust. You know, I've written many books. My latest is The Holocaust Sitter, which just came out. But now I'm trying to save lives. That's my main goal right now, to do whatever I can for the Holocaust survivors and their children. I'm quite upset that many Holocaust survivors cannot get their COVID shots, which means they may die. Why can't they get them? Because they can't operate a computer. So in Brooklyn, they tried to get volunteers to help Holocaust survivors because a lot of them live in Brooklyn, but it didn't work. Too many calls and the whole thing collapsed. So I put out a petition, which I hope you all will sign, asking the Claims Conference to give money so that we can develop a way of helping get our Holocaust survivors to these places to get their shots, to explain what has to be done. And this is very important. The other thing that is rather interesting, I'm 72. My father died at 74, so I find this kind of scary. He was in Auschwitz. My mother was in Skarżysko. And I think I fulfilled my promise to them to never forget. A long time ago, I started these programs in 1974 when basically no one was doing Holocaust memorial services. And I coined a phrase that got me into a lot of trouble. Those of you who know me know that getting in trouble is what I do. So it's no big deal. Never again, right? Never forget. And then I coined the phrase, that came from me, never forgive. And you have no idea how many people chased me and got upset at me and called in on shows. How can you not forgive? Well, it's really interesting. I don't forgive the Nazis. I may forgive other people, but I certainly don't forgive Hitler. You're going to be talking about DNA transference and other things. Let me share something that I really believe in. You may never have heard of this. It's called Gilgul. Gilgul is a Hebrew term for reincarnation. So allow me in the few minutes that I have, not to give a history of the Holocaust, not to go into psychology, which Jack will do, but to tell you about my life story, because it's kind of interesting. When I was very young, about 4 years old, it was July 4th, and I was playing with firecrackers. And my parents had just gotten to Kansas City, Missouri from Tennessee via the concentration camps. And the landlord decided to throw us out. And the next day we were done. Obviously, he was an anti-Semite. I didn't know much about anti-Semitism, but I started to learn. A little bit later on in my life, I went with my parents wherever they went. I'm an only child. They didn't drive, so they schlepped me wherever they went. Now, those of you that are Grina is a term for people that are new to America, green. And they slept me wherever they went, and I heard a conversation. And I think I was about 7 or 8. The conversation was in Yiddish. At that time, my Yiddish was a lot better than it is now. And the conversation had to do with a former wife and former children. I was very young. I kind of blocked it from my mind, but it always was with me. As I got older, I kept feeling there was something missing from me. Aside, you know, when you get married, they say it's ezer kenegdo, that you find your opposite. Well, I guess I'm still looking for my opposite, the reincarnation of the Gilgal. I really feel the reason I work so hard to try to help Holocaust survivors and their children is because of this reincarnation. Somewhere in me is the 2 children that were murdered by the Nazis. I found out recently the name of one of them and named my last grandchild after him. Reincarnation. Those of you who are on this program and feel that you cannot get rid of this feeling of doing something about the Shoah, the never again. It didn't come by accident. It's part of you. And I'm sure Jack will talk about this, but I say it's part of reincarnation. So as my life continued, I discovered when I got to Yeshiva University that there was a lot of anti-Semitism there also. Thank God, coming from Kansas City, I was taught by a friend, judo and karate, and I mean it, I did use it. I had to use it. I didn't have a choice. I'm a little guy, but I didn't have a choice. Recently, and this is what I'm going to leave you all with, and we're going to go back to Gilgal and reincarnation. I kept looking all my life for relatives. I have my parents, thank God, but they died over 36 years ago. And no brothers, no sisters, 1 set of cousins. Went to Yeshiva University, no family. Shabbos was very lonely. But I never gave up. I kept searching and searching. And thanks to DNA, and thanks to my oldest daughter, my first child, Ilana, I found my first cousin, closest relative, first cousin, lives in Israel. His entire family is very Shomer Shabbos, Hasidish religious. The other part of the family is normal Jewish. They're all in Israel. And then I found another cousin in Detroit. So at 72, guess what? A miracle happens and I find family. So I share with you, please, keep searching. Try to help other people. If you know elderly Holocaust survivors, call them. Try to help them get this shot. We're living in an age where people are dying by the hundreds of thousands. It is your obligation, especially if you're a 2G, a second generation, or a 3G, to call the Holocaust survivors, take them for the shots if need be, and do whatever is needed. I was able to get 30 people shots. How did I do that? I can't tell you that in public, but I did. And I'm still continuing to get people shots. So thank you for having me. God bless you. And let us always have nothing but happiness and nachas.
Amen. Yesh koach, Rabbi.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Rosenberg. Approximately a month ago, PJC lost one of our oldest and dearest members, Bronya Tagner. Bronya was also the last of PJC's Holocaust survivors. And tonight, I want to share just a little bit of her story that was recorded at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum and transcribed. Bronya was born on the Polish-German border in 1926, the youngest of 10 siblings. She was born into a family of hardware workers. She went to public school where she was the only Jewish student. Even before the war, there was an obvious anti-Semitism directed towards her. When she was walking to school, the children would line up on both sides of the sidewalk and push her into each other as if they were playing ball, and she was the ball. But before the war, life was difficult. but compared to during, it was a haven. After the war began, it was impossible to hide information from children. The fear was on the streets. Children heard it from others and went and told others. But Branya's family never gave up. They always kept faith in God and religion. Her father told the children that no one was bigger than God, and God would not let them die. It can't always be bad. There will be good times, and the war cannot last forever. They were determined to not sit and wait to die. The Germans went to the Jewish homes and collected all the people aged 10 to 20 to be workers. Branya, being age 13, was collected at her home. She and the other children taken that night were brought to a secondary school. They were given straw to sleep on. Due to all the stress and being pushed around, Branya was not feeling well. The soldiers then put her outside for some fresh air. She was put at a table but fell under due to a lack of strength. She fell asleep and was brought back inside. The next day, the main guy from the concentration camp, Mengele, lined up the people in the school and pointed to either the right or the left for who lived and who died. Branya was sent to a concentration camp. The camp was not yet built, so that is what the children sent there did. She built the camp that she would suffer in. After several instances of being sick and weak, a doorman realized what happened to her and told her that she would be with him that day. This Gentile was working at a factory before the war. He gave Branya a piece of his lunch and allowed her to stay all day. The next day she recovered. She was at the factory for 9 or 10 months. Her job was to take the cotton, break it apart, and put it into the combing machine. Over the course of several years, she had many jobs at the factory. One job in particular was cleaning the Germans' windows in the dark. If there was a single spot left on the windows, the men were either killed or beaten. To eat, the Jewish people were given coffee grinds for breakfast and unclean spinach from the ground for lunch. As she would walk from the barracks to work, everyone would go through and pick up the dead bodies and bury them in mass graves. She was a Heffinger, a prisoner. Branya was moved from camp to camp for a total of 6 camps over the course of the war. She was liberated at the age of about 16 or 17. After a while, her husband's aunt, they found out, was living in America. She contacted the committee, and Branya and her husband came to America in 1949. They lived with the aunt while her husband tried to find a job. Her husband worked at a chocolate factory. Bart's Chocolate Factory in Brooklyn was run by German Jews and gave jobs to the displaced Jewish people. After a while, they moved out of the aunt's house. Later, he worked in a grocery store and then bought the store. Due to competition, the store did not do too well. In 1952, they moved to Freehold, New Jersey. They worked as chicken farmers. Branya had 2 daughters, Fran and Esther, who I hope are with us here tonight. She used to lecture students about her story, but it became too strenuous. The war changed her as a person. Being so young when she was first taken away, it sculpted everything about her personality and mindset. She became a more giving person and believed that one should fight for their ideas. She wanted to be remembered for who she was after the war. She wanted to be remembered as a helping hand and those who had the opportunity to meet her and speak with her during onegs and kiddushes in the past know what a wonderful, special woman she was. She was most often found in the kitchen that bears her name. And let me just do this one. Yeah. Second. Do this, and I will put that up so that everybody can see my video went. There we go. That's our wonderful kitchen that bears her name. Hopefully everybody.
Wow.
She was painstakingly slicing lox and ensuring every oneg and kiddush was perfect. Up until a couple of years ago, she never missed a Shabbat service thanks to the many volunteers who would assure she had a ride there and back. PJC was her home, and she made it an inviting place for so many of us, with a warm smile and words of encouragement for our students. She was humble, loving, giving, and a true Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. It is my honor, along with all of us at PJC, to present the 2021 Woman of Valor Award in Branya's memory to her daughters. Not sure if you guys can see it from my screen, so I will screen share what that award looks like for you all. That plaque will be hung at PJC right next to Branya's kitchen, and a crystal replica of this plaque will be sent to you to have at home. She will forever be in our hearts, and her spirit lives on at PJC. And the plaque actually reads, "A woman of valor, a mother of generations, a woman of valor. She is precious in the gifts that she has given to our family. Her children have found trust and truth in these gifts. We follow in patterns that she taught. She is robed in strength and dignity, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teachings of kindness is on her tongue. We benefit and learn from her wisdom. May she always be credited for the fruit of her labor and her achievements. May she live on in glory." I'm now going to call on our Associate Rabbi, Rabbi Glenn Jacobs, who is going to recite a prayer for us.
God full of mercy, who dwells on high, protector of widows and father of the fatherless, please be not silent and show no restraint on behalf of the Jewish blood that is spilled like water, but grant perfect rest on the wings of your divine presence in the lofty abode of the holy, pure, and valiant, who shine as the brightness of the heavens to the souls of our brothers and sisters, 6 million Jewish men, women, and children who were put to death, slaughtered, burned, starved, buried alive, or who suffered other forms of unnatural death at the hands of the accursed Nazis and their associates. May their names be wiped out. In Auschwitz, Treblinka, Majdanek, Mauthausen, and other death camps in Europe, and who gave up their lives in order to sanctify God's name. Because we are at one with their memory, and we pray for the elevation of their souls, their resting place shall be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore shall the Master of Mercy care for them under the protection of his wings for all time, and bind their souls in the bond of everlasting life. O earth, do not conceal their blood, and let there not be a resting place for their cry. In their merit shall the remnant of Israel return to its rightful place. And as for the holy ones, their righteousness shall be in front of the Lord as an everlasting memory. They will come in peace and will rest in peace. They will meet their rightful destiny at the end of days. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Glenn. I'm now going to light a candle in memory of the 6 million and recite this blessing. You can see my candles. Just blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the secret fastness of the heart. We pause to light this candle, symbol of the human spirit that fought to bring light through the darkness. This light will stand as a permanent marker as we honor their life and memory. The human soul is a light from God. May it be your will that the soul of the 6 million exterminated in the Shoah enjoy eternal life, along with the souls of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and the rest of the righteous that are in Gan Eden. Amen.
Amen.
I now would like to call on Grenville Jewish Center's Rabbi Shivelowitz, who's going to say a few words and lead us all in a mourner's Kaddish. Rabbi.
Thank you, Imbar. I mentioned to Imbar that I wasn't going to speak because I wanted to give our speaker a lack of competition here. However, I was so touched by the Bronya Tagner tribute, a woman that I knew from, rest in peace, from day one when I came to the synagogue over 3 decades ago, and spent countless hours with. And what I want to say is that this is the first time that in my entire relationship with her that I'm hearing this story. For some reason, I guess maybe other rabbis of congregations may feel the same thing, that maybe the Holocaust survivors want to spare us as rabbis from the tragedies of these stories. And so she never ever once discussed anything that you mentioned, Inbar, other than the few things I know about them when they came to this country. But the actual warriors, I never heard anything. This is the first time I'm hearing this. And I'm proud to say that. Thank you for that. It's something that coming out now and greatly appreciated. Before I say the Kaddish, I just wanted to also say that tonight I am observing yahrzeit or anniversary of the death for my older sibling. And downstairs I have a memorial candle lit, which is traditional. And I was thinking that I'm going to say the Kaddish in memory of someone who was born 2 years after World War II. And the miracle of her birth in the fact that my grandfather, Benjamin Fast, a Kohen, was able to come to the United States several years prior to the coming of Hitler, and be the only survivor on his side from his entire family. And through that miracle of whatever the twists and turns that kept them here and not returning to Poland, which I think they were going to do at one point, and that would have been it, lost everybody, minus miraculously, as Rabbi Rosenberg just had mentioned, we found, my father, rest in peace, found one cousin on my grandfather's side, found his nephew by accident, total bashert, which means God's will. And we lost the entire family on that side. So in memory of that, in memory of those people, my maternal grandfather's family, my sister, who was a miracle birth as a result of all of that, I would like to say that before I say the Kaddish, it would be nice or wonderful if each one of you could think of someone now who you know. Just picture somebody as we say the Kaddish, someone who you lost, someone that you knew, someone in your family, whatever it was, people that had to that were lost due to Holocaust circumstances. Picture them and think about them, and maybe light the memorial candle tonight after we get off in their memory, and let's sort of say Kaddish in their honor and in their reverence. So please, anyone that wants to join me in this, please feel free as I recite the Kaddish. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, b'agalah uzman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach li'alam u'lomei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudisha b'richu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata v'amiran b'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlomo rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh Shalom B'Romav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'Imru Amen. All the martyrs, all who were killed, may their souls rest in peace.
Thank you, Rabbi. Okay. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to our guest speaker this evening, Dr. Jack Fried, born to the son and daughter of Holocaust survivors, is one of the many whose life has been forever changed by the events that transpired during the Holocaust. Intergenerational trauma is not a well-known concept, but for Dr. Fried, it meant that he had to take a journey into a past he didn't personally know, that of his grandparents' past, to find pieces to a puzzle that may answer his questions about the origins of a lifelong battle he has had with separation anxiety. His trip took him to Poland, where he uncovered a slew of pent-up emotions, fears, and dark histories. I want to welcome Dr. Jack Fried, and I just want to ask everybody, please stay on mute so we can hear everything. If you have questions, we will certainly take your questions at the end. Please put them in the chat bar so that we can keep track of them. And as soon as we're able to, we will go through as many as we possibly can. So right now, I'm going to hand it off to you, Jack. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm honored to be part of this. Thank you for inviting me. I know there's a lot to cover on this, so I just want to give you a brief background of who I am for those that haven't read my book or aren't too familiar with this. My name is Jack Fried. I live on Long Island. I am born to Israeli parents. I'm first generation American. My sisters, I have two younger sisters. They are also first generation American. Both grandparents from both sides, all four of them are Holocaust survivors. They survived Auschwitz. Growing up, we didn't really know much about it. Long story short, in terms of history about myself, I have my entire life, as far as I can remember, I have suffered from what psychologists have termed separation anxiety. Separation anxiety, would manifest in all sorts of different ways. As a child, I wouldn't want to leave the house, didn't want to leave my parents, didn't want to leave my family unit. Doing so would cause tremendous stress and trauma to me. And this was kind of a pattern that would repeat itself throughout the course of my life. I'm 49 years old. It's been with me forever. There was a point in my life back in somewhere between 2005, 2010, where certain stresses in my life were stressing me out. And I became aware of the pattern that every time my stress levels would reach a certain point, this anxiety would come out. It had basically reached a point where it was debilitating. I wouldn't want to leave my house. I'm not gonna, a lot of this is discussed in my book, and I don't want to focus more on the book. I want to focus more on the meat of why we're here. So it basically brought me to a point where I couldn't deal with it anymore. I was in and out of speaking to psychologists, trying to figure out what was going on. Where is this coming from? It was completely out of proportion to my experiences. Like I said, I was first generation American, brought up here in the United States. I'm a product of public schools. There's really no reason my entire life to have such a level of anxiety. At one of my sessions with my therapist, she actually brought up to me the concept of intergenerational trauma. It's new to me. I had no idea what she was talking about. She said, yeah, there's a lot of research being done in the field that is showing that your genes, the trauma that your parents and grandparents may have suffered in their life can actually imprint itself onto the genes, and those genes can be transferred to future generations. I was intrigued, I wanted to learn more about what intergenerational trauma was, how it worked. I knew that the separation anxiety I was suffering from, there had to be an answer somewhere. I mean, if there's an effect, there's got to be a cause. If I can understand the cause, I may be able to better handle the effect. My objective was to completely transform. Go ahead. Was to completely transform my way of thinking on a permanent way. And I have to be honest with you, the one person that I from the bottom of my heart thank for this is my Rabbi Yitzchak Hassin of the West Hills Torah Center. He taught me a lot, which I'm going to refer to notes in terms of things that I found helpful in terms of changing your mindset, completely changing your mindset. Let's first talk about what epigenetics is. Epigenetics is basically the genetic transfer of trauma. How could your experience with the environment transfer to future generations? That doesn't make too much sense if you think about it. It's a subject that's been poo-pooed a lot. A lot of people don't believe in it. When I first heard about it, when I first learned about it, I didn't believe in it myself. It didn't make much sense. The more I learned about it, the more it started to make sense. Why is it important? It's important because I find that epigenetics is relevant to self-understanding, to understanding who you are, where you came from, where these thoughts came from, what could you do about it? What could you do about these thoughts? Why are we designed the way we are? What's the purpose? And I found that when I went to Poland, which we'll get to in a minute, with my uncle Akiva, who was our family historian, a lot of the history came out. A lot of what I had no idea started to come out. A lot of my anxieties when I was there started to come out. The closer I got to understanding what my grandparents had been through, the more the anxiety would start to surface, and it eventually reached a level where it just couldn't be ignored anymore. It had to be confronted head on. But anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. So the study of epigenetics is basically the study of alterations of genes that change the way they function. It changes the way genes are read. An epigenetic mark basically means it's a change to the DNA. It's also a change to the RNA, which reads the DNA. And then when the RNA is expressed into a protein, that protein is also altered. That protein is also changed. So human experience gets coded into our genes. That's a very, very important concept that I had no idea was even in a concept. Our DNA basically becomes different. There's also studies that show that changes can occur in utero. There was a study by Dr. Rochelle Yehuda at Mount Sinai. She studied pregnant women that were pregnant during the World Trade Center attacks. She followed them for a time, and she had noted that a mother's traumatic experience can get passed to the newborn in utero. Okay, I don't want to get too much into the science because we're limited on time. But it basically showed that the environment in which someone is pregnant is extremely, extremely important. So her studies basically show that women in the second and third trimester that had babies, they had low cortisol levels, like parents that suffered from PTSD. There's something the mechanism isn't quite understood in terms of what goes on in utero to change the biology or the influence. But epigenetics provides a mechanism for short-term adaptations, which actually, if you think about it, is a good thing. If we were still living in the environment of the concentration camps, the experience that our grandparents passed down to us would, in a sense, help us to survive that type of situation a little better, if you think about it. So in a sense, it gives you the epigenetic transfer of trauma, gives you tools which can help you to deal with a traumatic environment, a traumatic situation, assuming that the environment doesn't change, but it does change. I grew up in a completely different environment than my grandparents did, yet I'm dealing with, and I'm sure there are a lot of people, a lot of a lot of you out there that also have, that are descendants of Holocaust survivors, that have some sort of nagging demon hanging on, latching on, that you can't make heads or tails with. You know, that suffice it, taking that into account with growing up in an environment where your parents or grandparents are dealing with trauma, that is going to build up on what's already going on in our heads. So basically, the genetic transference of trauma gives people an enhanced set of skills to be able to respond to diversity, if in terms of a good thing with that. So in a nutshell, that's basically epigenetic transfer of trauma. That's basically what it is. Now, when it comes down to it, the biggest issue that I had, and I'm only speaking from my experience, you know, I'm not going to spend too much time on how horrible the camps were and what went on, and I mean, we all know that, we've all been there. I want to kind of get into what had caused me to change my level of thinking, and when my thinking changed, by the way, and it's an ongoing process. It's not something that happens and then you move on. It's something that you have to deal with for the rest of your life in terms of thoughts. It's like exercise. So if here a minute. So before I get into any of that, I just want to go over real briefly my my trip to Poland. I figured that if I was able to understand what my grandparents went through, maybe I can understand what's going on inside of my head a little bit more. Why is my level of anxiety so completely out of proportion to my experiences as a child growing up in the United States with all the opportunities in the world? So basically, let me just set this up over here. I have a quick slideshow I can go over with you. I have to share my screen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should be able to.
Get a full thing. Let's go to share screen. Okay. So let me just get this started. So in 2007, let me backtrack a little bit. My grandmother, when she was in the camps, she was actually saved by a Polish guard who worked in the camps. He saved her life. It's actually a pretty well-known story. There's a tree planted in his honor in the Avenue of the Righteous in Yad Vashem. In 2007, the president of Poland was hosting an event that was honoring all of the Gentiles that had saved Jewish lives during the Shoah. He was one of the honorees. My uncle and my mother were invited. My mother could not go. I went in her stead, and I figured it would be a great opportunity for me and my uncle to go back and basically dig for roots. So get this started here. So this was the invitation that we had received. Yeah, this is October 2007. The first place that we had stopped was in a place called Aushwitz. We have family there. It was very interesting. This cemetery, you had there was a Jewish side on one part of the cemetery, and then there was the Gentile part on the completely other side, separated by a road. The Jewish part of the cemetery is complete shambles. It was dirty. It was unkept. It was vandalized. There were people, there was litter all over the place. Just to give you an idea as to what these matzavot are headstones. Just to give you an idea of the enormity, because this is something that I've never seen anywhere outside of the United States or in Israel. Here's the matzavot from this angle. You can't really appreciate the enormity or the beauty of them. My uncle Akiva, who stands just over 6 feet tall, this is him in the picture, standing in front of one of the matzavas. So we stopped in Aushwitz. Got a couple more here. Okay. After we left Aushwitz, we went to the town of Sandomierz. Sandomierz was a town located right outside, it's in southern Poland, located right outside a shtetl called Klimonów. Klimonów is where my grandparents, my maternal grandparents are from. This is their story, basically. My paternal grandparents are from Czechoslovakia and Hungary. Unfortunately, I don't know much about their side, but we stayed in a hotel. It was a beautiful hotel. The hotel was built on the former site of the Jewish ghetto. The name of the street was Ulica Żydowska, which basically translates from Polish to English as Jew Street, Jewish Street. This is where all the Jews were gathered before being transported to the camps, Treblinka to be exact. Okay. The next morning we basically walked the town a little bit. We went to the synagogue. The former synagogue of Sandomierz is still standing. It's not obviously functioning as a synagogue. It's functioning now as the local town's archives. We went in. Before we went in, what I like to do is I walked around the synagogue to see if I can locate a cemetery. Back in the day, synagogues and cemeteries were very, very close together. So you can walk by. When I went to the back of this synagogue, there was no cemetery, there was no headstones, there was nothing. There was a paved parking lot completely. I looked over, making our way back to the front of the synagogue. On the back of the synagogue, as you can see, there was a nice little swastika that was greeting us there. If you take a closer look, and there's actually several of these stenciled all over the back of the synagogue. If you take a close look on the top over here, on top of the swastika in Polish, it says finish them. That's what that translates to. You could also see over here a gun pointing to the head of the swastika. So this is how we started our day at the synagogue. The level of anti-Semitism, regardless of what you hear and see, it's bad. It's bad, and it's only getting worse. Front of the synagogue was this plaque. I'll read it real quick. The former synagogue, built at the end of the 17th century. At present, it houses the city's archives. In the past, since 1364, 128 years before Christopher Columbus stepped foot in the New World, the Jewish community in Sandomierz had the privilege of the king's protection. Think about that, the time frame and how quickly they were decimated by Hitler, Yamach Shemo. We walked into the synagogue. They gave us we showed them the invitation of the president of Poland. We told them we were there to try to look through the archives to see if we can identify any type of identifiable information that were descendants of Jews from Sandomierz, from Klimonów. They allowed us in. They gave us strict instructions not to film anything, not to take pictures of anything, with the exception of the murals. The murals were tattered badly, and they were absolutely beautiful, enormous. Let's go to a different one. You can see we have over here one of the zodiacs, a mazal. Here's another one. Over here, this was, and again, the picture really doesn't do much to appreciate the enormity of what was inside. You can see fish over here painted around the mural. The Aron Kodesh was below this picture. You can see some cherubim over here on the side. On top, if you can see a little faded. This is actually, I believe, it's a quote from the Aleinu prayer. It just gives you a sense as to how Judaism was practiced back then. It was like a completely different animal than the way it is right now, in my opinion, in the United States. And a lot of that, I know, has to do with not so much, well, assimilation, yes, but it has to do a lot with the fact that things are done in English and not in Hebrew. When you're reading prayers in Hebrew and you're setting your mind to a specific emotion or trait that you want to express to Hashem, to God, it's completely different. You know, this is telling you, know before who you stand, know before whom you're standing in front of. Prepare yourself, prepare your thoughts, prepare your mind, your emotions to cry out to Hashem. It's incredibly moving. Just reading the words, it was incredibly moving. Here's another mazal, another astrological sign, the 10 Commandments, a mural of the 10 Commandments. You know, I'm going to go through this fast. This was on the way to Klimentov. Klimentov to me didn't look like it changed much in the past, you know, 75 years, whatever. They're still going around town with a horse and carriage to transport goods. The streets were cobblestone. I mean, if there wasn't so much blood spilled in Poland, it was really a very beautiful, quaint town. It was really beautiful. Kind of wonder what my grandparents would think if they knew we went there. This is the synagogue in Klimentov. This synagogue was one of the most beautiful synagogues in the region. People would come everywhere to see the synagogue, to pray in the synagogue. The nearest closest synagogue to Klimentov was in Krakow. Krakow to Klimentov is not too far away, but it took us about 3-4 hours to drive because of the conditions of the roads. But in any event, this was actually a picture of what the synagogue looked like. This is not what the synagogue looked like when we were there. I'll show you what it looked like in the next slide. But basically, down here, it was the entrance for the men. Up here was the entrance for the women. The women would be praying on the top. The men would be praying on the bottom. And behind the synagogue was the cemetery. And the cemetery is still there. Not the headstones, though. I'll get into that in a little bit. Let me show you. That's what the synagogue looked like when I was there, when we took a picture of it. We were able, thankfully, because of our guide, we were being a little bit proactive. I wanted to try to gain access into the synagogue, which we did. I'll show you a picture on the inside. There was really not much at all. It was actually a little on the sad side. This is the Aron Kodesh inside the synagogue. You can see a couple of candles, a flower. This is actually a picture of my uncle Akiva and my mother back in, I believe it was 1991. They went back to Klimentov, and this was basically what was the remains of the cemetery. So behind the empty synagogue, they basically built an elementary school, leveled the ground, removed all the matzavot, left the bodies interred in the ground, but they removed the matzavot. They created a playground. This was the cemetery. This was what was left of the cemetery when my mother and my uncle were there. When I was there with my uncle, that was gone, not even there anymore. There's maybe a half of or a quarter of a piece of a headstone there with a memorial candle, but this fence isn't even there anymore. None of this is there anymore. Okay, so going back, my uncle was telling me, walk around the grounds here on the cemetery, Jack. He goes, it doesn't take much to dig before you start to find bones. So what are you talking about, Akiva? He goes, bones come up to the surface here. Are you kidding me? He goes, yeah. He started kicking on the ground, and lo and behold, I have 3 fragments of bones. This looks like it's either a rib or a clavicle. No idea what these two are. But you could imagine the level of emotion and what was going on in my head as I'm picking these bones up, as I'm trying to grapple with why I was there and everything that kept just we were there for 4 days, and I could speak for, I could write books about this. But anyway, I took these bones with me. Why did I take them with me? The playground was very filled with kids and parents playing around. They were very, very curious as to what we were doing. They didn't understand any English. Our guide spoke fluent Polish. I understand maybe 1 or 2 words, hello, goodbye, good morning, thank you, yes, no. So we went and we asked them, do you kids know what this is? Oh yeah, and I have, by the way, about 12 hours of video of all of this. I documented everything. My video camera did not stop for a minute. So we asked the kids, do you guys know what this is? And they looked at it. Oh yeah, those are Jew bones. These are Jewish bones. They're Jew bones. Oh, the Jew bones. Yeah, they're all over the place, especially over there by the chickens and by you can find a lot of them over there. Oh, really? Okay. What do you do with the bones when you come across them? What do you kids do? The answer is, we take it to the history room in the elementary school, and we throw them in a bucket. We keep them in a bucket. And we have a nice collection, a bucket of Jewish bones. Every time it rains, comes to the surface. We play soccer, comes to the surface. It's horrible, but I dedicated a chapter actually of my book for this because it left such an impression on me. It was a dilemma. I wasn't sure what to do with these bones. I'm not religious. I didn't grow up religious. I did not grow up in a religious household. My grandfather, after the show, stopped believing in God. He says that. I, to this day, don't believe him. I believe he was angry with God for a very good reason, but I don't think he stopped believing in God, which is interesting because when I asked my other grandparents, do you still believe in God? Yes, without hesitation when they were alive. But anyway, I called my rabbi over here, Chabad rabbi. I asked, I told him what was going on, what was happening with me emotionally, what should I do? He basically told me, you should not have disturbed the bones. You should have left them. I said, halachically, what am I supposed to do? You should have left them. Well, I didn't leave them because I didn't want them going into a bucket, in a history class. If anything, my intention was to bring these bones back to America with me and have them buried in the same plot that my grandparents are buried at my expense. That's not what ended up happening. What ended up happening, hashgacha pratit, is divine intervention. Hashem manages the micro details of everything. As we were checking into the Holiday Inn in Krakow, because the next day we were going to go visit Auschwitz, there was a yeshiva that had checked in right at the same time we did. I was exhausted emotionally from the day. I wanted to go upstairs, take a shower, and go to bed. My uncle Akiva decided I'm going to go out and smoke a cigar, which he did. When he did, he ended up striking a conversation with one of the rabbis of the yeshiva, told them exactly what had happened, told them about my bone dilemma. Akiva comes back upstairs to go to sleep, and I'm already in bed. Says to me, I have a solution to your bone dilemma. You have a solution to my bone dilemma? After smoking a cigar, what happened? He goes, the yeshiva that checked in? He goes, yeah. Well, I spoke to the rabbi. I told him he's going to come up. He's right next door. His room is right next door to our room. Are you kidding? He goes, yeah. So basically he came up, knocked on the door, told me, he heard about what happened. I spoke to him, reiterated basically what my uncle said. He said, I'm going to be downstairs for the next hour or two. I'm giving a lesson to the students. If you want to come down and if you want to take the bones and give them to me, I'll take them. I'll have them buried in Israel. I said, thank you very much. That's very thoughtful of you. I don't know what I want to do yet. It's too close to me. It's too close to my heart. I don't want to make it. Okay, I understand, no problem. He says to me, he goes, if you change your mind the next morning, he goes, come and see me. I'm right next door. Just knock on my door. Thank you very much. Long story short, I sat there pacing in the room for about an hour, trying to figure out what to do. I took the bones out of the makeshift container that I made for them, laid them out on the counter, as you could see here in front on the slide, and went downstairs. And as soon as I opened the door and started walking in, I tried to be quiet as not to disturb him in his lesson. And I figured, let me see if I can pick something up from what he was teaching his students. And as soon as I sat down, there was complete silence. He didn't take his eyes off me. He asked me, in Hebrew, what do you want to do? Are you here because of the reason I think you're here? I said, yeah, I am. He told his students the story. They were gasping. They couldn't believe it. I gave him the bones. I said, thank you very much. I gave him some tzedakah, for what he did. And that took care of my bone dilemma, which was a weight off my chest. This is a picture that's very, very famous. This is a picture from Buchenwald. Why am I showing this picture? Because as everyone knows, Elie Wiesel is pictured in the middle bunk here. I think 7th from the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My uncle Perry, let me go back, is also pictured here. It's Perry right here, top bunk's 2nd from the left. Elie Wiesel is the 7th. 7th to the right, and Perry is 2nd from the left. So when we were in Klementov, we took a picture of Perry's house. My uncle Akiva called Perry. He's not with us anymore, unfortunately. He passed, but you know, the memories that Perry had from Klementov of the house and what was around the house and what was behind the house, nothing changed. It was amazing. It was incredible. From Klementov, we drove to back to Sandomierz. So I showed you earlier the murals in the synagogue of Sandomierz. I said that behind the synagogue where there was once a cemetery is no longer. What happened to this tombstone? What happened to the body? Well, the bodies are still interred. The tombstones were removed. They were removed into this cemetery, which is on the other side of town. This cemetery is actually the new Jewish cemetery on Suha Street, on Suha Street, which took the place of the old cemetery. The old cemetery meaning prior to the Shoah, the new cemetery meaning just after, during and after the Shoah. So this cemetery is actually controlled by a church. The church shares the same grounds as the cemetery. The church is also a parochial school, has students. When we pulled right up to the cemetery, up to on the side of the church, again, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was the wall around the cemetery, surrounding the entire cemetery. This was the wall made up of broken matzavot. Here you go. We got a couple of full matzavot, but there's still, you can see they're part of the wall here. This was our guide referred to this as a lapidarium. This is what happens to all the matzavot from the old cemetery. They were brought to the new cemetery and they made a monument out of them for the Shoah. What was interesting is that Akiva, my uncle, went through this and looked through it and was able to spot a matzavah from a family member that belonged to a family member. Factor was the family name on this. From there, the next day, everyone knows this, we went to Auschwitz and to go look for basically to dig for roots to Auschwitz, to understand, to see what happened. Again, I'm not going to go over the atrocities and what happened. That's all in my book. You can read it. Basically, when you walk into Auschwitz, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing with my cursor, but on the left-hand side, these buildings over here, after you pass this gate, that is all offices. That is the archives of Auschwitz. That is that's the first place we went. Our guide actually submitted, we filled out a form. She was able to pull us documentation of my grandparents that they have there, that we were able to pick up on the way back. So I'll go just a couple of pictures. This is the only gas chamber that was in Auschwitz. This is the one. This is it. You can see the crematorium right adjacent to the gas chamber. This is Auschwitz. This is not Birkenau. Again, the electrified fence. A couple more pictures from Auschwitz. Block 11, the death block. That was my grandfather's block. He was sent to Block 11. Why was he sent to Block 11? Because he was a political prisoner. He was a communist. So he sat in jail. And there were a couple of instances where the noose was placed around his neck at the death wall, and at the last minute, it was taken off. I think that had something to do with the fact that he was a tailor by trade. He would repair Nazi uniforms. With that, so, a lot of beatings occurred. He actually had carved his name in one of the bunks in block 11. My uncle and I tried to find it. We couldn't. A lot of what was there that was original was already sealed off. This is the death wall. On the right of the death wall is block 11. On the left, this block over here was the women's block. This is where gynecological experiments were done. This is where all sorts of horrific experiments were done on women. The brick part of the wall here is original. This part over here where the flowers are is not. And you can guess as to why not. This was actually a picture I took in Birkenau, looking out, not looking in, looking out. So you could see a little bit on the left-hand side, the selection platform. This is a little bit of a closer picture. I went up into the tower, actually, and this was a picture I took from the upper end of the tower. You could see very plainly the selection platform over here on the right. When I was up there and I looked at the selection platform on the right, I don't know what it was that kicked in, but I suddenly understood separation meant death. Separation equaled death. This is it. This is the spot. You were separated here, you were done. You were going up the chimney in 2 hours. That was it. That was it. And I started realizing, okay, perhaps this separation anxiety I have inside of me isn't from me. It belongs to somebody else. It doesn't belong to me. So why am I waking up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, not wanting to leave my house, going from room to room with my children, lying in bed with them, afraid to leave them, afraid I'm never going to see them again? Where is this coming from? From where? I couldn't put two and two together. There had to be a reason for it, which is what sparked my research into epigenetics, which is what actually sparked my delving into Hasidut, which again, Rabbi Hassin, amazing man. But we'll get into that. Okay, so the next slide, again, a lot of the bunks were destroyed. There are only a few of them that remained. Here's a plate that I found in my grandfather's bunk. We were able to actually track down where he was in Birkenau after he was taken from Auschwitz and sent to Birkenau. Same with my grandmother. The ground in these camps, you have to understand, if you've never been there, if you've never visited, not only is it a cemetery, but there are artifacts scattered, littered everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. Here's a plate, a rusted out plate that I found. You can find shards of latrines. These are the latrines. The rest of the latrines were actually bricked up. Again, I'm not going to get into everything. All this is in my book. Okay, so I took this picture because I'll read it quickly. On their arrival in Auschwitz, most Jews were sent by the SS for immediate death in the gas chambers. However, they were often forced to wait in turn in this clump of trees if the gas chambers were full at the time. I'm sure people have seen these pictures. I'm sure you have seen these pictures. When I look at these pictures, to me, they look like they're displaced. This looks like it's happened a long time ago, but it didn't. And when you're sitting and you're looking at a black and white picture, and you look at the exact spot, it brings a whole new reality to what went on. Here's another plaque: to the men, women, and children who fell victim to the Nazi genocide. In this pond lie their ashes. May their souls rest in peace. Here's the pond. Okay, some more pictures. Birkenau. This is original. This is actually used by the body draggers, or Lechen draggers, the body collectors, to collect the corpses. This is one of the gas chambers in Birkenau. Again, the only gas chamber that is intact was the one that was in Auschwitz, not the one that's in Birkenau. The ones that were in Birkenau, the Nazis destroyed as they were fleeing. Here's one. There were three of it. Here's one of them. Here's another one. Again, this is the railroad tracks from inside the camp, looking out, not out looking in, looking out. So you can see very plainly the selection platform on the left-hand side. Memorial candles littered the tracks. This is some of the documentation that we got from the archives in Auschwitz. This is particularly